And welcome back to Face the Nation, page 2. Joined this morning by an all-star cast of reporters and commentators. Jeff Zeleny of the New York Times, Nia-Malika Henderson of the Washington Post, plus our own political director, John Dickerson. And joining us from Boston, Niall Ferguson, who has written Newsweek magazine's cover story this week on President Obama. Neil, let's start with you because you pretty much make the case that Barack Obama needs to go.
Well, yes, Bob, and I do it more in sorrow than in anger. We obviously had high hopes of this man 4 years ago, but when you think back to what he promised in the inaugural address in 2009, he just hasn't delivered. And that's really the key issue. If you look at the economy, it is growing at half the speed that he promised in his first budget. If you look at unemployment, it's more than 2 percentage points higher than we were promised. And the debt has not stabilized. It's on an explosive growth path. So it's hard to admit that your hopes were unfulfilled, but that's, I think, what Americans have to do now.
I think I should point out that while you say we were disappointed in his record, you did work for John McCain in the last campaign.
I did, Bob, and I disclosed that in the piece, and I'm happy to disclose it now. But I also was, I think, a good loser. The day that the election was decided, I said, let's face it, the better campaigner won. And he did. He really ran a spectacular campaign, not only getting the nomination, but winning the presidency. And his qualities were really there for all to see, quite apart from the symbolic importance of having someone of African descent become president. But, you know, in the end, 4 years on, the question is, has he done a good job as the chief executive of the nation? And I think we have to accept that he really has disappointed us.
Let me go to you, Jeff Zeleny, because you've been out there covering this campaign on the campaign trail. And in the beginning, it seemed that Mitt Romney's thesis was basically just what we heard Neil say, that Barack Obama just didn't get the job done. He made a lot of promises. He disappointed people. But lately, he seems to be shifting the campaign to talking about Medicare, which I must say, I was a little surprised by that because, I mean, this is kind of the third rail of American politics. I mean, I think most people would agree there has to be some reform done on Medicare, but to try to shift the campaign to that, I found that surprising.
And it sort of happened while we weren't watching, really. I mean, it was all happening at the same time as Governor Romney was selecting his vice presidential candidate. But you're absolutely right. I mean, for months, really, Governor Romney has been trying to create a permission structure, if you will, for voters who voted for President Obama 4 years ago. Say, you know what, it's okay to not vote for him again. It's okay to, you know, he is a nice guy. And Governor Romney has said this for months on the campaign trail, you know, nice guy, good family guy, but he's not up to the job. Now we've had a 180 here. Clearly that was not necessarily working for the Romney campaign. We're seeing much more of a base election. The Romney campaign headquarters in Boston realized that they needed to shake things up a little bit, and they are trying to expand their base among Republican voters. And this Medicare argument, it's going to be fascinating to see how it plays out. We don't have a playbook for this. We don't know if we're still operating on the old script. You know, Democrats have been very successful at races at all levels of running on the Medicare issue, but there is a sense that people are more concerned about, you know, the deficit and other things. So if the Romney campaign can thread this argument issue and go forward with it, it'll be fascinating. But I'm not sure that they can win the argument. So far, the first weekend, I don't think they've shown that they definitely can.
Well, what have you seen so far since Ryan went on the ticket? You know, a lot of people thought, and I mean, I think it's absolutely right. I mean, the Romney people have told me that the reason that they wanted to make this vice presidential selection early was because they wanted to get a little bump in the polls. They wanted to give it time to play because they knew that with the Democratic convention coming immediately after the Republican convention, if they waited till then to announce it, then they probably wouldn't get much of a bump. Well, it turns out they didn't get much of a bump.
That's right. The polls show they didn't get much of a bump. It's like 1% or something like that, below what Cheney got, below what Palin got, below what Biden got as well. But there has been a huge jump in terms of enthusiasm. They've been able to join both wings of the Republican Party with Paul Ryan representing, you know, he's the young gun, he's the Tea Party, and obviously Romney being more of an old school, moderate sort sort of Republican. So you've seen these huge crowds there, 15,000 people greeting Mitt Romney, greeting Paul Ryan, so much so that they had at one point thought they would split up in the week before the convention, but now they're going to be together, the dynamic duo out in New Hampshire tomorrow. So I think another thing that you're seeing as well is Wisconsin, this state that Democrats have won. I think the last person to win it, Republican to win it, was Reagan. But now all of a sudden that's a toss-up. That's 10 electoral votes, and Ryan seems to have had an effect on that. And they're going to send the White House is now going to send Biden there, showing that they're all of a sudden worried about that state maybe being in play for the Republicans.
What about Biden, John?
No one's ever asked that question. What about Biden? It seems to be the constant question with Joe Biden. You know, this was a problem, obviously, for the administration this week. They were in the Romney campaign's face on Medicare. They felt pretty good about it. Then Joe Biden said this crazy remark about putting people back in chains. That's not just, you know, there's a certain, people give Joe Biden a break because he's done this so much. It's one of his character traits. But in this case, the Romney campaign seized on it, kind of took an excessive amount of umbrage because they see it as a way to tear down the president's likability. This is a president who campaigned against the kind of comment that Joe Biden made, and what they want to be able to say is he's not the guy you elected, as Jeff was talking about, and this is one of the many ways in which he's not the guy you elected, and this is evidence of that.
Well, Neil, let me get you back into this. Where do you think this campaign is now? Did as Neil says, they did get a lot of enthusiasm, and Republicans seemed delighted to have Ryan on the ticket, but there was a certain amount of delight amongst Democrats as well. I mean, it kind of made both sides happy in a funny kind of way.
I think the Democrats are in for a very big shock if they think that this was a tactical mistake by Mitt Romney. I think it was a genius move, his best move so far, because Paul Ryan is the future of American politics. He is the only politician who for now years has been arguing we have to deal with the fiscal crisis before it gets to the point that it deals with us. You know, when you look at the real unfunded liabilities of the federal government, and this is the work that my friend Larry Kotlikoff at Boston University does, we're talking more than $200 trillion here. And the thing about Paul Ryan is that he's not only serious about that issue, he has a mastery of that issue. He also really gets under the skin of the president. Remember, it was Ryan who really provoked the president into getting serious about budgetary issues, though he wasn't so serious as to endorse the Bowles-Simpson Commission's recommendations. So I think that Ryan is the key here. I think what's interesting is that although the bounce on his initial nomination was very small, that's true, I think in completely the opposite way from Sarah Palin, Ryan is going to grow in his credibility the more the American public sees of him. He's not just smart, he's very likable. He has many of the character traits that Mitt Romney really doesn't have. Paul Ryan is easygoing, he's funny. You know, he connects with younger Americans in a way that I think Mitt Romney struggles to. And as a combination, they're really greater than the sum of the two parts. So this is, I think it's terrible news for the Obama campaign. They must be really worried, and they must be wondering whether they should get rid of Biden before it's too late.
And just to pick up on Neil's point, that's one of the reasons that Romney and Ryan are campaigning again together. That one of the things that Ryan does is tell the story about Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney has a problem. He's not likable, and it's not getting better. One of the things you do in a campaign is make, and then especially at a convention, is make a candidate more likable. That's what Ryan does. But Peter Hart did a focus group this week for the Annenberg Center, in which with women, some Republican independent Democrats in Wisconsin, and what those women showed was that Ryan was more likable than Romney. That's great, except that Romney's the guy at the top of the ticket. And so there is a way in which he can help Romney by making him more likable. There's also a way in which people look at Ryan and say, I wish the guy at the top of the ticket were that way. And in the end, part of this race may come down to who do you trust? And if it's about who do you trust, Obama or Romney, the one you like more may be the one that those up for grabs voters go with.
But the Obama campaign is really trying to talk about the policies of the Ryan budget plan. They are really trying to, and we'll see that this week, they're going to roll out advertisements and other things targeting women specifically to look at exactly what this Ryan budget plan means, though. But you're absolutely right about this. The thing that the Boston headquarters believes in Romney world, that this has been the biggest, the best outcome is it's made Governor Romney better. and he has struggled throughout the whole year to be sort of a good campaigner. They think that Ryan sort of energizes him, and if he's better at the top of the ticket, that's his only chance he has to win.
That's right. I mean, he brings a sort of aw-shucks charisma to this ticket. He loosens Romney up on the campaign trail. I do think, though, the problem that Romney has always had is that he's not been able to appeal to Hispanics. He hasn't been able to appeal to African Americans. He hasn't been able to appeal much to women either. There's like a 20-point gap in terms of women voters, and that still remains. I mean, we still have a party that has problems in terms of expanding the base and recognizing the demographic shifts in the country.
Well, what about that, Neil? Because, Rudy Giuliani, who was on the broadcast earlier, he didn't say it this morning, but he has said it before. He has said that he thought Marco Rubio would have been a better pick. Is Romney going to be able to increase the number of votes that Republicans normally get from Hispanics without Marco Rubio? Do you think this is going to hurt him down in Florida?
I don't think so, because remember, one of the things that Paul Ryan brings to this ticket is Roman Catholicism. I mean, he's a devout family man, and that's something that might actually appeal more to the broad Latino Hispanic vote than Marco Rubio would have done, since it's not clear that his particular brand of Cuban Republican is a popular pick right across the board. I think, therefore, Ryan is better from that point of view. On the woman question, I mean, I have my doubts that this is really going to be the game-changing issue. The issue in this election is the economy. It's not abortion, which is far less of a salient issue than it used to be. And on the economy, Ryan has one big advantage. He has a plan. All the Obama people have is a narrative. If they attack Ryan on policy, which they certainly are going to do, we can answer, what's your policy? You know, what is the policy on your side? And because they don't really have one, I think that puts them in a much weaker position. The key issue for the Romney-Ryan ticket is to make this a debate about the economy and who has a plan for turning it around.
Well,
and when you sit down and look at the Ryan budget, it is a plan to turn the USA around. It's not an austerity budget, it's a growth budget. And right now, the real problem that Obama-Biden have is that they don't have a plan. All they have is attack ads.
Well,
and
if
that's not going to be enough.
If that's the plan, Jeff, let me get back to what we were talking about in the beginning. Why all of a sudden are we talking about Medicare and not talking about the economy? Because clearly that's what we thought in the beginning that we're going to talk about. Do you think maybe the Romney campaign didn't quite agree with Neil here? Maybe they think it's Medicare and not the economy now.
I don't think that they think a Medicare argument is going to win the day for them, but they're more pleased that it's happening now in the summer of August, than in the weeks before October, because they believe at that point, of course, this is going to be rehashed and revisited throughout the debates in October, but they believe by that point it's going to be a confused issue. It's going to be not new information. They do still think this election is on the economy, but if you get Paul Ryan, you pick Paul Ryan, you get the entire Paul Ryan, and that includes this Medicare argument. So it's not, in an ideal world, I think they would have preferred to not have this, but they are doubling down on it because they believe that it is one thing that makes Mitt Romney look like he is a change agent. And we've sort of seen the script flipped here. The Romney-Ryan campaign, they're presenting themselves as the change agent, and that President Obama and Vice President Biden are the status quo, totally different from 4 years ago.
And in some ways, they're framing themselves as compassionate conservatives. I mean, you saw Paul Ryan down there with his mom, Betty Ryan, who's 78 or 79. He talked about his own.
It's not so old.
That's right. It's not old at all. So yeah, they know that they have to win the senior vote. I think John McCain won seniors by like 51 to 48%. They know that to win this election, they've pretty much got to win Florida, and certainly they've got to do well with the seniors.
One thing we see in this Medicare conversation that we're having is Paul Ryan says we want to have this debate, and the Romney campaign says that too. But what they're really doing is not talking so much about their plan. Paul Ryan talked about it yesterday for less than 2 minutes. What they're talking about is how bad President Obama's plan is. So in that sense, it's not embracing the third rail. It's trying to push President Obama onto it. And that's the way, in a larger sense, if you look at the Romney campaign, they want people to know they have a plan. They don't want to necessarily talk too much in specifics about that plan.
Where are we right now, John, in this campaign?
We are in still the tiny honeymoon period of Paul Ryan. The campaign is now a choice and not a referendum. And we're still pretty much stuck in the middle in terms of the polls.
All right. Well, I want to thank all of you for a very interesting discussion.